This talk is going to cover some of Surf Drive's history as well as its existing conditions and a few considerations that have gone into the planning process. For anyone unfamiliar with the Falmouth coast, Surf Drive is a low-lying coastal roadway that connects the villages of Falmouth and Woods Hole. It's recognized as a high-value asset to the town of Falmouth, providing access to public and private beaches and vistas of Vineyard Sound that draw residents and tourists alike. It even provides the course for the Falmouth Road Race, which is an annual event where the overall economic impact is estimated at $16.5 million in local and state tax revenues and jobs. For Falmouth residents, Surf Drive is iconic and central to the character of the town. It's also an environmentally sensitive area comprised of a barrier beach system associated with the tidal embayments of Oyster Pond and Salt Pond. Eversource electrical lines run from the Mill Road parking lot to Martha's Vineyard, supplying a critical power connection. And beneath Surf Drive lie other utilities as well, including an 8-inch diameter cement-lined cast iron water main from Oyster Pond Road to Elm Road, and a 10-inch diameter water main from Elm Road to Mill Road, which you can see on the map here. These mains serve the neighborhoods landward of Surf Drive from Oyster Pond up to Woods Hole Road and east all the way to Shore Street. Further west, the force main, carrying septage from Woods Hole, veers north at the intersection of Surf Drive and the Shining Sea Bikeway, and that continues to follow the bike path. Sections of the roadway sit at a vulnerable elevation of less than 7.5 feet, protected by a series of primary dunes on the seaward side that, starting east of Mill Road, are fully vegetated and then decline in elevation and vegetation further west. The coastal beach is punctuated along its length by a series of groins and jetties. Existing coastal dunes are experiencing scarping in the vicinity of Elm Road as the toe of the dune pulls back toward the roadbed. In this area, patterns of sediment transport change seasonally with movement in both lateral directions. When looking to the west, Knobska Point appears as an armored coastal bank providing little sediment into a starved littoral system. To the east, sediment sources are little better as coastal engineering structures disrupt longshore transport. And finally, to the west near the bike path, in that corner over there, is a rock revetment that displays typical end scouring effects that threaten the roadway. Surf Drive's coastal location is both its virtue and its downfall. As the shore is receded at a rate of negative 0.4 feet per year, the roadway has long been vulnerable to storm surge. This has been true since the road was originally constructed 147 years ago in 1879. So here's a photograph of Surf Drive taken in September of 1938. Several days after the worst hurricane in southern New England's history. And you can see in the foreground here some of the effects of that storm surge with damage to the roadbed. Overtopping has obviously occurred. And then up here, I believe a couple of structures that may have started out their lives on the seaward side of the road and got pushed into the marsh. Here's another one from the same location there. So this is the Moors, which is just west of Elm Road. Same spot here, but again, you can see how this illustrates the damage. Since that time, Cape Cod has experienced countless smaller weather events, and each has chipped away at the remaining coastal dunes. Hurricane Bob in '91, another winter storm in '92 that undermined the roadbed, Hurricane Sandy in 2012, and most recently, a southeaster on January 10th, 2024, that again overtopped the dune and damaged the road. And that's just a short list. Roads like Surf Drive are in a tough position because barrier beaches want to move landward and roads do not. So here it is in 2017. And again, this storm was probably a 2-year or 5-year storm. But you've got significant sediment that's moved across the roadway, but at least no undermining. Regarding Surf Drive's future, there's great uncertainty when it comes to how future storm events might impact the area. But in a larger sense, the contest between road versus nature is no longer a question of will it happen. We know that answer. Based on the state's sea level rise projections, parts of the road may even be flooded as soon as 2050 during normal tidal cycles. The question is instead, how long can we continue to benefit from this important piece of infrastructure before nature says otherwise? And how do we plan for that eventuality? It would be impossible to devise a scheme that brings the road out of harm's way completely because retreat options are limited. The barrier beach affords no higher elevation uplands that might offer refuge. As the Woods Hole Group's 2025 feasibility study indicated, the removal of a road lane could be an option. However, the challenges associated with that alternative would include traffic management designs and the fact that a one-lane retreat would not contribute significantly to a higher dune crest elevation overall. Targeted nourishment is one alternative that may buy time. The road consists of a series of eroding coastal dunes that in some places have existing dune crest elevations as low as 4.6 feet. Expanding scarps also threaten areas between Salt Pond Channel and the Moors, one of Surf Drive's lowest elevation spots. The properties that lie seaward of the road are a mix of town-owned and private, and efforts to mobilize a nourishment project here would require extensive outreach with private property owners, especially when the placement of sediment might entail certain requirements for access. The dune system is constrained by the roadway on its landward side. On the seaward side, there are protected species concerns that include nesting shorebirds such as piping plover and least tern, as well as vegetation, including sea beach knotweed, Polygonum glaucum, a relatively new arrival that has taken root in select locations. Further offshore, eelgrass populations would limit the seaward extent of nourishment so as to not potentially smother those colonies. An engineered dune crest elevation of any significant height would be difficult to achieve because the front and back slopes would require more breadth than is available and would not achieve the proper ratios for both stability as well as habitat concerns. And in the end, the highest elevation that could be attained is 8 to 9 feet, which would allow the dune to survive 2-year and 5-year storms, but not a storm greater in magnitude than a 20-year event. Some conversations have turned toward abandonment, and yet a key component of that strategy lies in the fate of the utilities. Surf Drive has both a water main that runs the entire length of the roadway, as well as a force main that is limited to its western section. Even under the most catastrophic damage, no portion of the road could be abandoned, while the existing water main continues to serve residential properties on Surf Drive, Oyster Pond Road, Elm Road, and areas east to Shore Street. If that water main were shut off, the resulting decreases in static pressures and fire flows would create a condition of resource insecurity for areas far beyond Surf Drive. In that situation, a gain in coastal resilience would be met with a corresponding loss of social resilience. However, such a situation would be avoided by constructing 2 new 12-inch diameter water mains along the entire lengths of Oyster Pond Road and Elm Road all the way up to Woods Hole Road, and installing a new 10-inch gate valve at the corner of Surf and Mill. Under that scenario, a water main shutoff would avoid service disruptions, allowing water to circulate into those areas while bypassing Surf Drive completely. To modify the existing infrastructure with these resilience adaptations would allow the town a broader suite of options that would not come at the cost of social resilience. And for communities that are currently engaged in the MVP 2.0 process, social resilience is a new framework for the reexamination of what now might be termed traditional resilience priorities. Areas such as Surf Drive present a challenge where communities must not only adapt to the effects of climate change, but could also be impacted by management decisions that are meant to mitigate those effects. And that risk underscores the importance of engaging with stakeholders whose communities may be impacted in obvious or unforeseen ways. Targeted nourishment on Surf Drive combined with water main improvements would stabilize resource areas, though, in the short term and provide more flexibility in the long term. And at that point, the idea of abandonment at one scale or another could become more feasible owing to the reduced impacts to surrounding areas. But even then, abandonment remains a complicated scenario as considerations for how to maintain water quality in Salt Pond come into play. Regular maintenance dredging would require some type of unimproved road that could allow vehicular passage, and costs associated with the removal of the roadbed and restoration using native species and compatible sediments would be yet another factor. That has not even begun to approach the challenge of discussions with property owners or what management would look like. For Surf Drive, relocation is not a new idea. At town meeting in February 1938, Falmouth citizens actually voted to retreat the road from its original 1879 layout. Perhaps then, because infrastructure was more limited, the task of doing so may have seemed less onerous. Coastal residents may have also recognized the dynamic nature of the shoreline in a way that we no longer do. But on this, we can only speculate. It was a timely action, though, because little did they know that a mere 7 months from that meeting, the town would face its most destructive storm event of the century, one whose damage is yet to be surpassed. Ultimately, the fate of Surf Drive is a political question, not political in the sense of campaigning or elections, but merely that the outcomes are of public concern and will be weighed by elected officials, town staff, and the public itself. To look at it from a resilience thinking perspective, radical change can only occur when the evidence in favor of it is overwhelming. While evidence has been marshaled that does indeed indicate that at a distant time horizon the roadway will be unusable, the more immediate short-range mental model anticipates the system, i.e. the roadway and the environment, as having the ability to assimilate change and maintain an equilibrium. We do not know the exact point at which that will cease to be true, when the system is no longer able to assimilate change. But that point will mark a fundamental threshold, whereupon the transition to a different regime will bring with it different traits and feedbacks. This process is far from concluded, so the observations that I've provided here are from the midpoint on a journey. But I hope that you come away from this with several ideas. One is that coastal resilience does not exist in a vacuum. Its success may depend upon cooperative relationships between different managers and stakeholders, and this is more than just a feel-good notion. The relationships here can be critical, especially when the longer-range nature of resilience planning is in competition with the priorities of day-to-day emergencies and management. The support and cooperation of the Water Division has made it possible to consider resilience adaptations that would otherwise be difficult to achieve. Planning efforts like the one at Surf Drive challenge us to reconcile philosophies of preservation and resilience, and yet, as evidenced by the 1938 vote to relocate sections of Surf Drive, not to mention the hurricane itself, the willingness to change rather than maintain an open defiance toward nature has long informed our thinking. And as we continue to recognize and discover how resilience can take shape within different coastal areas, I hope that Cape communities can plan boldly, but also reflect on how resilience has been inherent throughout the past. Thank you.